Hey, and welcome to another episode of Fast Forward, a podcast from QSR Magazine where we talk to the founders, innovators, and entrepreneurs behind some of the world's most exciting fast casual restaurant concepts. My name is Sam Oches. I am the editorial director of Food News Media and the editor of QSR. And on today's episode, I'm really excited to share my conversation with And Pizza co-founder and CEO Michael Lastoria. Now, Michael I've known for several years now, since way back in 2013. I did my first story where I spoke with Michael and his co-founder, Steve Salas. And, at the time I was doing a story about how brands can get more involved with their neighborhoods. And I discovered this 2-unit shop out of DC that was doing this wild thing where they were putting pictures of their community members on their walls and designing their stores to really reflect their community. And I was really just taken by how different this brand was and how much it really marched to the beat of its own drum. And ever since then, I've just been really excited to watch as this brand has grown to now 35 locations up and down the East Coast. And they've continued to really do their own thing. As Michael will say in this conversation, they try to have that anti-chain mentality. Where they're doing things a little bit different. They're taking that sort of fast casual pizza chain model and turning it over, flipping it upside down, looking at it a little bit differently. But what And Pizza I think is really best known for and what they get a lot of credit for, rightfully so, is for their culture. They have been all about their culture within their company and taking care of their tribe, as they call it. Their employees are deeply committed to this brand, and there's good reason for it. This company pays them fair wages. Michael has advocated on Capitol Hill for $15 minimum wage. They have, really invested in the communities that they operate in and get their employees involved with that. As Michael shares in this conversation, they get their employees involved with the decisions that this company makes, and they want their tribe to feel invested in the direction of this company, which is really different from a lot of fast casual brands. And you will never really see a employee base as dedicated as And Pizza is when you see that many of their employees have actually gotten the company's trademark ampersand logo tattooed on them, which I think speaks volume for a company that can have employees this committed to their mission. But And Pizza stands for more beyond their employee base. That culture extends to their customers. And recently, during the government shutdown between December and January, And Pizza offered free pizza to government workers. Ended up giving away around $300,000 worth of pizza during that 35-day shutdown, which when you think about it is just incredible for a 35-unit concept to give away that much food. But as Michael says it's the right thing to do. It's what they stand for. Michael, it's interesting when you talk about what he's hoping to accomplish with this sort of, different alternative approach to a food service brand. In his words, he wants to change the industry. He doesn't want to just beat the other fast casual pizza brands. And of course, he's, probably not going to do that now that Blaze and Mott have hundreds of locations. To him, success is all about changing the industry for the better and making it a more responsible place. And, he wants to share his playbook, as he says in this conversation. And I think that's pretty admirable. I was really blown away on our recent Reader's Choice Awards, live now on QSRmagazine.com. When we got results for that, we polled the industry on who some of the most admired brands and most respected leaders in the industry were. I was really blown away when I saw that Michael came in at number 3 as the most respected fast casual leader, behind only Brian Nichol of Chipotle and Peter Cancro of Jersey Mike's. When you think about the fact that those two brands have thousands of locations and Michael has 35, it really shows the influence he already has in the industry and the impact that he is making at And Pizza. And I'm just thrilled to watch as this company continues to grow, continues to do great things. And I had a really wonderful conversation with him back in February at his in their brand new headquarters. As he says in this conversation, they had moved in like the day before in their DC headquarters. And this was also right after the government shutdown came to a close. And so was really excited to have a conversation with Michael about how he has built up this alternative pizza company into what it has become today. So really excited to share this conversation with And Pizza co-founder and CEO Michael Lastoria. Okay, I'm here with Michael Lastoria, the co-founder and CEO of And Pizza. Michael, thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
All right, so Michael, let's walk back to the beginning of And Pizza. Now, you have an advertising agency background. You owned your own advertising agency, and then back in 2011, you just decide, hey, I'm going to open up a fast casual pizza shop. What was behind that decision?
So a couple of things. I mean, I got my start actually when I was 22. Kind of take a step back even further. So I grew up in, one of the smallest country towns in America, 60 miles south of Buffalo, and it was actually so small it wasn't called a town; it was called a hamlet. So those things still exist.
Sure, yeah.
And so when I got a chance to sort of get out of that hamlet, I went to the largest city that I could get my hands on, which is New York City. So moved to New York City, 22, this little country kid, big city dreams. Started up my first company 6 weeks later, which was sort of a media/advertising technology business. Did that with a co-founder, this guy, Ian Gray, and ended up having some success with it very early on. 4 years later, sold the business to a private equity group, stayed on board to run it for the next 3 years as CEO, which is a title I have sort of mixed feelings about. Maybe get into that later. Mm-hmm. Then got involved in the more creative services side, so ad agency, which eventually kind of incubated And Pizza. So it was 2010-ish. Met a guy, the other co-founder of And Pizza, Steve Salas, and we decided that we were going to, create a company that was based on a core set of values and create, a product that we felt like didn't exist, but more importantly, a brand and a culture that was all about promoting unity, right, and inclusivity and connectedness. And so the symbol that best reflected that was the ampersand, which is kind of funny because it's a bit of a goofy name. People are like, what is that? Like, sure. Why And Pizza? But it was all about leading with this symbol. And, we sort of felt like in a time and a place where, a country, nation/world is becoming increasingly more divided. Wouldn't it be cool to lead with a symbol that brought people together, that connected them? And of course, a food that everybody loves. It's universal. It's delicious. And you can do kind of anything and everything you want with it. But it was more about creating this sort of modern consumer brand that was our point of view on how a business should act and behave. A business should have, humanity. It should have personality, because it's not just about the good that we do. It's also about the style that we have, the culture that we create. We call our employees tribe members. We have this really crazy thing where about 20% of the company actually has the And logo tattooed on them. Every shop is designed differently. It's a company-owned and operated business model. We have 35 shops now because we opened up our first shop in Washington, D.C., historic corridor, 8th Street Northeast. And now we're in, Virginia, D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York, Boston, Miami, and we're really looking to kind of expand aggressively.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the wild story. But back in 2011, we packed our bags when I was in New York City, moved to Washington, D.C., saw something here that we felt was most reflective of the sort of community that we wanted to be a part of and what was happening here from sort of a creative undercurrent, as well as wanting to make sure as a branding guy that we could allow the business to organically evolve, right? First rent was $3,000 a month. We were making everything from scratch in a kitchen. We were doing everything probably the right and wrong way simultaneously. We were paying a living wage, and the business model was completely upside down, but we sparked something. We sparked something in the community. People fell in love with what we were doing, who we were as people, and a line formed. That line never stopped. And that first pizza shop in 1,300 square feet does north of $2 million in revenue and has one of the healthiest economic models in the industry. I don't think any of that happens, though, if we didn't first do the right thing and let the business breathe and become what it needed to. Because none of this was necessarily profit-oriented or motivated. It wasn't like, hey, we see a niche in pizza and we're going to go jump. It was like, no, we're going to build a really cool brand. Yep. And we're going to put our heart and our soul and everything we have into this thing, and we're going to see where it goes. And if it works, rad. If it doesn't work, good lesson learned, on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Almost seems like you guys backed into the pizza part of this, right? So it's like you had this idea of the brand and the core values in place, and then pizza sort of became the thing that to you guys sort of brought all those together. Does that seem like a good assumption?
That's exactly right. I mean, I think what was most interesting, not necessarily about pizza, but the food service industry. because we could be selling toothbrushes, right, under the same sort of set of values, right, and brush. And it was really the fact that the food service industry employs 10% of America's workforce. People forget that. That's a crazy statistic.
Yeah.
And so thinking if we can enact some change, right, in that industry, that change can be impacted not just locally or regionally, but nationally, and like the big dream of maybe global one day. And so we've always looked at And Pizza kind of being a case study of what can we do in terms of, treating our people, democratizing decision making, having a distinctive culture, paying a living wage, promoting as many leaders as we can from within, just empowering and just being a good, not just employer, but just being a friend and a brother and someone that works kind of shoulder to shoulder. Because I feel like so many businesses are disconnected. I've heard the story over and over again where, it's just rinse and repeat, where people that have been in the industry, that have success in the industry, they see a new concept or jumping on a trend and trying to mass replicate it as quickly as possible for some financial exit. And that can work, but that's kind of the opposite of how we decided we were going to get into this business and this industry. I think it's had a lot of upsides, and it's also been really challenging.
Yeah. Well, talk about that a little bit, because, in this industry, this is an industry that's been around, specifically quick service has been around 60, 70 years. There's sort of a way that we do things, right? That's sort of the understanding among a lot of companies. You pay low wages, you want to get your prices as low as possible because that's what people want. It's all about value. So you guys are coming into this with a completely different mindset. That's disrupting the entire paradigm of food service. Did you have companies you were modeling off of? Or, what were the ideas or what were the models you were looking at that were helping you kind of guide your way?
Yeah, well, clearly not. I think, honestly, a lot of the modeling was, studying the industry so that we weren't just completely misguided, but also, leading with sort of our beliefs on what the right thing to do was. I think where it worked really well is that we really connected with every single person that walked through the four walls of the first pizza shop. Mm-hmm. That's where we got this notion of this tribe, right, versus employer employee, because to us it was a group of people that were connected to each other, connected to leadership, and connected to a purpose, which we thought was a pretty cool thing. How we paid people was about, well, how are you going to pay the person who you're working shoulder to shoulder with, anything less than what they need to put a roof over their head and food on their plate and what they need to take care of their friends and family, et cetera, et cetera. And how are you going to serve something that's subpar if that ingredient is out there and it's better than that one, and we know it's more digestible, it has a healthier, nutritional panel and profile? Like, that's what we should be serving. We should be serving the best cheese, and if not, we should be making it. Mm-hmm. We should find the best tomato. We should make the best possible dough that we can with the most responsible sort of ingredient platform. So everything we've done from day one was really what we felt was the right thing to do, not necessarily the profitable thing to do.
Sure.
And the nice thing is that when you have enough top line, right, in terms of like sales, it can make for a very, very, very attractive business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, I imagine this being back in 2011, the first shop opened, 2012?
July of 2012.
2012. So, yeah. That was really, you guys struck right at the right moment. That was both right moment for fast casual in general. It was really kind of sailing as high as it had been. And it was also the right moment for fast casual pizza, because this was before the boom of brands, really, especially the franchise concepts, just doing sort of the land grab and expanding across the country. So you struck at the right moment. Why is this concept, why did it work? Especially for you guys come down to DC. What was right about this community? What was right about just the consumer base in general?
I would say that from my perspective, because again, I think the quote unquote fast casual pizza industry, which to us, we were just, pizza, there's not a whole lot fast, right, about
mm-hmm.
it. And it's not really, we don't create dining environments that are inherently casual.
Right.
So it doesn't fit really categorically into that, but we had no idea that this was going to be a thing per se. Obviously saw an opportunity in, what the Papa John's, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars of the world were doing, and saying there's a much better way to do that. But not looking at necessarily what, Chipotle did or didn't do and say, well, we're going to create a pizza version of that.
Right.
I really wasn't necessarily about the customization and personalization. Like, you could always customize pizza. I mean, every pizza shop I've been to, I can tell them what I want. Making it visual was just a modern form of ordering. That was just logical.
Right.
But for us, it was more about experiential and brand than it was about an assembly line is going to be the thing that differentiates us. But I think I'm thankful and grateful that we weren't necessarily industry guys approaching this from an industry perspective, because little did we know that there was a Blaze and there was a Mod and there was other guys on the horizon that had, a war chest of not just like capital, but of people, of operators, of a franchise network and system. So I think if we were trying to make a quick buck, as I've seen others have maybe come before or after and not been as successful, like we wouldn't have had a point of view, right? The brand wouldn't have a personality that I think is what has allowed us to have success,
right?
And allowed us to kind of march to the beat of our own drum or do our own thing and be able to carve out a niche for us that I think has unlimited potential for growth, and also to do it in some of the toughest markets in the country, right? It's not easy to operate or to do pizza in DC, in Philly, in New York, in Boston, right? People have a strong preference for, local regional pizza. But people really do appreciate and pizza. It's its own thing. It's its own shape. It's its own style. We use a lot of different, flavor combinations. We make our own soda. We do really cool brand partnerships, right? So I think when people walk into an and pizza, they don't feel like they're necessarily walking into a pizza place. They're walking into someone's home or someone's bar or someone's night, and they're experiencing something different. And it may not be for you, right? The music's louder. We play a lot of music for the younger kids, and it's styled in a very different way. But like, hopefully, you can take something from that's interesting, that's unique, that feels different, and you want to come because it's going to definitely be fun.
Right.
And you'll feel it, and you'll feel that people are smiling, laughing, joking. There's definitely a sense of style in everything we do.
So one of the terms that came up probably about the same time, and a lot of fast casual started peddling this term, is lifestyle brand. What is your what do you think about that term? Is it something you like to apply to and pizza? Is it something that you think adequately describes what you're doing?
I mean, it's hard because spending a lot of time in advertising, we try not to use that word. It's a good descriptive word. I think for us, it's kind of more brand as an extension of self. Right, there is something to be said about walking down the street, with a Shake Shack bag versus walking down the street with a brown, greasy Five Guys bag. You may like the Five Guys burger better, but it's definitely not the cooler thing to be walking down the street because it looks like a grease explosion.
Right.
Right. So I think you got to think a little bit about I do think that when people, spend money or choose and pizza over XYZ, they are choosing it because it is a little bit more of a reflection of themselves, either in terms of the pizza box. It looks like it could be a handbag, right? It has a style to it. And so walking down the street, it feels different. Or it could be that they've done their research. They know what our brand stands for. If they were going to create a pizza shop or if they were going to create a company, they'd create the and pizza of. So they're very connected to the humanity. They're connected to the symbol. They're connected to who we are as people, or just they're connected to the fact that it's creatively led. It's got a sense of style to it. It's got a personality. It's distinct. All of those things I think matter. People more and more are looking for that versus something that's more vanilla or more generic. People want your weirdness, right? Brands need to be fearlessly weird. You can no longer just do something a little different or a little better of what someone else was doing. You need to bring way more than that,
right?
Because things are changing. They're changing rapidly. And guess what? Restaurant industry, if you do the same thing in the next 3 to 5 years you're doing today, I can guarantee you that will be a slow and painful way to the bottom.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the loud music. This is something that the younger kids might like. I think when I think of and pizza, I think almost like this is millennial haven. I mean, this is obviously a lot of touchstones that we would ascribe to millennials as being things that they like. It becomes a status symbol to have that ampersand on the box that you're carrying, all those things. But does and pizza work for everybody? I mean, is this something that you specifically target the younger generations? Or, I mean, is this something where you see this being, it can fit into anybody's lifestyle? Yeah,
I think the brand definitely has a personality, and the personality happens to be younger. But when you think about that, it's like, well, can the younger person sit around, the the older person's dinner table, right? And it's like, yeah, of course, because that conversation is going to be interesting. So I think it's less. And by the way, this was a question that came up when we were raising capital, because we had to raise, the other sort of dirty little secret about company owned and operated is very, very capital intensive.
Yes.
And if you can't raise boatloads of cash, like, you're not going to grow because it takes time. Right, it takes time. And I think the expectation that you're going to open up 8 to 10 locations a year, like In-N-Out Burger did for God knows how many decades, a little bit different now. So,
sure.
I think I think from that perspective, it's one of those things where you really, really, really have to sort of be thoughtful about, and it turns out like the suburban model works really well, and even the suburban.
Yeah.
Some of our highest grossing, best performing locations are in the suburbs. And we had to answer a lot of questions like, is And Pizza too urban? Right? Is it going to translate? And it translates extraordinarily well. And that's been something that's been really exciting to see, because it is something, I think, for everyone. It's not alienating people, but if it alienates you, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But it's not intentionally doing that. It's intentionally trying to be a thing that very much is true to itself.
Sure. Well, I think, if you guys are riding a wave, I think it's cresting at the right time, because when you think about millennials also will probably move to the suburbs once they have children and families. And this is a thing I think is about to happen, where the suburbs are going to start getting overrun with a lot of those so-called urban brands, because as millennials migrate outside the city, they're going to want to take their preferred brands with them, right?
Yeah.
So is that something that you see as targeting that kind of movement for expansion plans?
I don't, it's funny because I'm not necessarily sure if that's a more recent thing. I just think don't think that people living in the suburbs have always wanted the quote unquote suburban experience outside of maybe buying a house or having some land or cheaper rent or better schools for their children, or just living like an adult, because it's harder to live like an adult in major urban cities than it is in suburbs.
Right.
I just think that urban brands now are going into the suburbs, and suburban people are saying, wow, this is great. This is different.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you always wanted to support the suburban brand. I think it just happens to be the fact that there are more urban brands moving out into the suburbs, and suburban people have always wanted that. It just so happens they have access now to those things.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the origin story.
Yeah.
2012, you guys open up your first shop, H Street in DC. Then what happens next? I mean, was it smooth sailing? Was it just lines out the door, you guys were good to go? Or, I mean, what was that learning curve like for you guys, and what was the success story like?
Yeah, it was not smooth sailing.
Yeah.
There's been, I don't think I'd ever used the word smooth to describe anything about the sort of experience or how we got to where we are today. It was extremely chaotic. But it was, sort of very much a family culture of, well, let's lock arms and let's figure out how we're going to do this, and let's be, thoughtful and respectable to listen to, those that are coming to work here every single day. Let's listen to, our guests. Let's listen to the neighborhood. Let's listen to the community. Let's listen as much feedback as we can, not because every time someone says something, we react to it and we change. I think it's important to just be, thoughtful. And it really took us the better part of, I would say, the first 6 months to kind of be grounded in knowing how to operate an And Pizza. And we're still learning today. It's not like this is something that is rinse and repeat. It's knowing what our supply chain should look like, knowing what wages ought to be, like knowing how to operate within four walls, understanding what local shop marketing looks like, understanding the sort of broader economics of the restaurant industry, understanding the people of the restaurant industry. So a lot of it was just like trying to stand this thing up and make sure it doesn't fall over. But again, the thing that made it work was the people kept coming, and they kept coming back for more and more and more and more. And that's why, when we had an opportunity to move offices, where our new office, we've been here for literally a day, looks like a giant warehouse with nothing in it. But when we had an opportunity to move to Northeast DC, which is blocks from where this started, we did. When we first built out our large scale dough production facility, we chose to bring it to Northeast DC because this is where the whole thing started. We've tried from day one to do as much as we can to be a good community member, to pay it back to those that supported us when we were doing the right thing. And I think there's something to be said about a brand that literally has succeeded in a really tough place to succeed because it did the right thing and the community supported it and they were the voices, right? They're the ones that spread our gospel.
Right. Yeah.
They made this thing work in Washington, D.C., which made it work, right? In Northern Virginia, in Maryland, in Philly, in New York, in Boston, in Miami, et cetera. So there's a lot, I think, to be said, and we're going to keep investing in this community and this part of D.C. and broader D.C. as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first learned about Am Pizza, it was probably 2013 when I first reached out to you guys because you were at two shops. And at the time, what you were doing was so unique, which was each of the shops was a reflection of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You had photos on the walls of the people in the neighborhood, and it was a unique design component. And I was so used to trade dress, right? That's what everybody is committed to in this industry is trade dress. And so it was such a cool approach to, being able to reach out to the community where I think so many companies are like, well, we'll donate money, we'll give you a check, but you guys really embedded yourselves in the community. Talk about those efforts, how that kind of came into fruition and how that's been sort of like a winning success for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just, first off, taking the time to understand, right? When you set up shop, like introducing yourself to other business owners, talking to people that have lived there for, a couple of days to a couple of years to a couple of decades and just kind of understanding what is missing. And I think it was kind of the early stages of crowdsourcing. We were kind of crowdsourcing design by just, communicating with people and then trying to bring not just a reflection per se, but trying to bring something that felt more like the vibe and the culture of the neighborhood. If that could live within the four walls of Am Pizza, what would that be? And that's been... And to this day is one of my favorite things, which is being able to spend the time in doing that and doing that kind of more so and more so on an annual basis. So that's been a really cool thing. But I think people feel that. Yeah. They definitely feel that. And I think you bring an element of like a soul into a space and also working within the space itself. Like there's been a lot of spaces aren't meant for the same trade dress. Part of what makes sort of the local sort of restaurant and retail thing really interesting is that, well, people are designing, and really good architects, and even if you're not, they're designing around what's already there, not trying to fit something into, right? How do we fit our perfect box into this space? It's what are the walls saying? How does it feel? And we get a kick out of this because as we go through the sort of design process, there always is a little bit of a design build component to Am Pizzas because as you're going through it and as tight a drawing set as you want, there is going to be that as it's being built, you're going to see things as you're, pulling back a wall, right? As you're going a little bit high, you're going to see certain things. That design actually doesn't work because it doesn't work with the space because it's not meant to be there. I'm not meant to do a certain thing. Yeah.
At what point did you guys exit DC for the first time or enter a new market?
So, I guess by DC, if Northern Virginia and Maryland count, I would say
those would count. So when did you guys?
So I think in Baltimore, I would kind of put that under our wings as well. I would say Philadelphia.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Philadelphia is funny because it's sort of notoriously, like you were talking about earlier, these are cities that are really committed to their local brands. I think Philadelphia even more so. And there are countless stories of companies that have failed in Philadelphia because they march in thinking, hey, look at us. We're that new, sexy new chain. And it just doesn't work like that. How did you make it work in Philly?
I think it's like anything. It just goes back to letting people know who you are and why you're here. And for some people, that's enough. For others, it's just a time thing, right? If that didn't work, you getting to know me, you getting to know the brand, then I will prove it to you that over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we will be here. We will keep expanding here, and we'll keep doing the right thing. And we will step up when we need to, because we're a part of this for the long term. And that was as simple, but you got to provide a consistently good product and experience, and you have to get it right. And that's really, that's really important. And so getting it right means again, the product, the service, the experience, the real estate, the community, et cetera, et cetera. So I just think it's a more complicated thing because the bar is higher because people are looking out for something that's fake. And if it's fake, i.e. you didn't give it enough time, you didn't do it the right way, like they're going to call you out on it.
Absolutely. So for you guys having a more high quality menu, you rely upon a more upscale supply chain. You are embedding yourselves in communities. Everything you guys do seems like it would take time.
Yeah.
So when you enter a new market like a Philadelphia, I mean, does that take you way longer than an average restaurant company because you guys are having to plant roots a little bit more?
I think initially it did, but I think we've got it down to a place now where not so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Not
you have
so
a model
much.
for what you're doing.
You have a model, but also over time you build out brand equity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, even talking to you and the things that you've wrote about, the amazing journalists in the industry. It's one of those things where once you have a reputation, that also really, really helps. It helps with landlords. It helps with neighborhoods. Like when people can look up and see, okay, who is this company? And like, what are they doing? When we end up giving away, over 30,000 pies to government workers when the government shuts down, like people take notice. We're not doing that because it's a great press story. We're doing that because these people built our brand. And do the math on that. It's over $300,000, probably one of the largest donations anyone's given in a government shutdown. That was a heavy lift, not just in like the actual, wear and tear of the pizza, the lines literally forming up, wrapping around, blocks and blocks just to get that free pizza. It's those kind of moments. It's, the fact that we've been a fair wage, living wage fighter, right? The fact that we got, legislation passed in Washington, D.C., and when the mayor passed it and signed the bill, she did it right outside of an Ann Pizza. The fact that I've been on Capitol Hill, right? I've been introducing the last two Raise the Wage acts with Senator Sanders, Pelosi, and Schumer. And this is not to be a politically charged conversation, but like that's who I am. Mm-hmm. That's who the company is. And the fact that we do a lot of that similar work in every neighborhood that we're in, we've supported over 1,000 causes. Mm-hmm. Like that kind of goodwill, it's not intentional goodwill. It's just the nature of like, you get a reputation. Right. I think our reputation has helped us with credibility where we have that sort of anti-establishment, that anti-chain thing. People know they can trust us, that we're going to do the right thing, that we're here to stay. We're not looking to flip this business for a quick exit. It's not the mass replication of a thing. It's just authentic. And authenticity, thankfully, is becoming more important now than ever before.
Right. Yeah, and you talk about the things that you have done. I mean, you have really established yourself, I think, as really a visionary for this company and for the movement that you are pursuing. And that must speak volumes to your employees. And I know that your employees, you talked about how so many of them have the tattoo of the ampersand. Mm-hmm. How much does that mean to you that you sort of build this devotion from your employees to the company? And how do you continue to try to invest in your workers?
I think this day and age, like, I know there's a lot of rhetoric around people can say whatever they want whenever they want it. It doesn't have to be truthful, and that's worked. I think that just happens to be time and place. I think people really are looking for leadership that truly is walking the walk. And I think you're going to see that in the coming years becoming the most important thing is the substance, the character of a human being. And I think for this company, it really has been about that. It's like, look, I can say a lot of things that may inspire you and get you motivated to either come to work here or to dedicate your time, energy, effort, life force. But it's really what I do with those words every single day. And I think that is the thing that the people that come to work here feel the most, is that leadership is walking that walk. Like we literally are. We've set up. So the only way that we communicate with our guests, which is, our cute way of saying customer, and our tribe members, which, as we mentioned, cute way of saying employee, it's only text message. You can't call Ann Pizza, you can't email Ann Pizza, you won't get a response. We shut down this all text message. And we have this really cool group of kids. We call it, we created this fictitious character called the Pizza Plug. And that's who you get on the other end texting back and forth with you. So on the employee side and the tribe side, like that's how we make a lot of decisions. We're constantly texting out, hey, should we go right or should we go left? What do you think about this? And we've actually changed 6 different policies in the last 6 months, employment policies that have positively impacted because of the conversations and democratizing the business that never would have happened before. And the reason for that is I fundamentally believe that the decisions shouldn't be made. Why does it make sense if there's 1,000 people that work in a company that the decision's being made by 10 or worse off 1?
Right.
And I can tell you how disconnected at times that one or those 10 people are from the other 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going around, like, find out like how much time people are spending in their restaurants, in their pizza shops, understanding like the actual issues that the employees of the company are facing. Like, once you do that, your eyes are open. So we have created a system whereby that one-to-one communication, whether it's us surveying, asking questions, or just literally, I mean, we have hundreds of conversations going daily. Probably 25% of that are tribe questions and conversations. And the other 75% is guest. And it's amazing, remarkable. It keeps our ear to the ground, our finger to the pulse, and like we have a really good sense of like what's going on, how we can become a better employer. And I think people get more emotionally connected to the business. And then 4 times a year, I literally get in front of every single person, and then we talk about the themes. Okay, these are all the text message themes that came in over the last 90 days. Here are the policies that we enacted based on your feedback, and then here are the things we didn't do. Mm-hmm. And giving them the actual explanation as to why we didn't do something. And my favorite thing now is when we did this the last sort of quarterly was not even me giving my perspective, but then letting, because we do it in the groups of 30 to 50.
Okay.
We go around and around and letting them debate on the merits of should this be addressed or should this not be addressed? And like watching literally the debates happening amongst tribe members and them coming to the same conclusion that I would have come to in terms of like what I was ready to present, in terms of why we chose not to do something.
Right.
And that's why, I mean, it's an experiment. Like, I don't know how long or how far, but it's working and it's really interesting.
How often do they change your mind?
Oh, all the time. And it's not necessarily about changing the mind so much as it's just things it was a different perspective. Oh, I didn't think about it that way. I didn't think it would affect you that way. Right. And then you get the story, you start to understand it, and it's like, that makes sense. And things that you think, like things that a lot of our, tribe members thought would be known, I didn't even know about. And I'm very active in the pizza shops. I'm constantly going around, constantly working in it. So that's the biggest thing, is just a barrier in terms of knowledge of like what life is actually like, and making sure that our finger's on the pulse.
Is that getting harder as you grow? I mean, you're getting more and more employees every shop. I mean, does that become more and more hard to do this?
You would think it's actually gotten incrementally easier because technology.
Yeah.
I mean, just leveraging a platform where somebody can communicate, they can choose to communicate anonymously, or they can choose to reveal who they are. The fact that all you need to do is pull out your phone and you can like express anything and anything you want to us, and you will get a live human being that cares deeply about who you are and what you have to say, and you'll get a response and you'll engage in a conversation like you would, one of your best friends. That's meaningful.
Yeah.
And that is meaningful. And then being able to then leverage all of that data to make smart and thoughtful decisions, to know what everyone is thinking.
Sure.
When we send this stuff out, I mean, our engagement's not, 10%. I mean, it's always north of 50%. People are participating.
Wow.
Or we have our own podcast. That's how we communicate. We don't do a weekly newsletter. People don't read. And I know that may come across in journalism not a good. People don't really read.
No, I get that.
And if they read, it's in the shortest possible form.
And headlines.
Right? And headlines, the 1 to 2 minute or the 30-second stuff, not the 5, 6, 7, 8 minute reads. So we communicate, via text message, link to the podcast, right on SoundCloud, and there you go. And like literally everything is fun. And we get tribe members on there, we get guest speakers on there. Like, it is a wild time, and it just communicates sort of the 411 on the company. So it's like going to text message, going to podcast, that kind of stuff is like real and it's working.
It's connecting with I'm sure your employees are largely younger.
Yeah.
That's something that connects with them where they are at.
Average age ranges from 22 to 23 years old.
So that's exactly what
and
they're
the
looking
hardest
for.
thing to do is, and by the way, comms, like it has to be early and often. Like, and not just in terms of like the podcast, but every time something happens meaningful, we send out the breaking news alerts. People usually get 1 to 2 text messages a day, and it's just like they know everything that's going on right around the same time that I know what's going on.
It makes them feel like they have an ownership to this company.
You're a part of it.
Yeah.
You're literally watching it happen in real time, because after the fact, people don't feel connected.
Right.
People want news, right, a certain way, and they expect if a company's going to give them news, they expect it in the same format.
Right.
I mean, how many push notifications do you get, right? Whether it's sports, and
So many.
so many, but like it's happening in real time. And so why wouldn't companies behave the same way? Why do we get a free pass? Why are we allowed to communicate in a way that's outdated? right, that misses the mark and then expect that you're going to read it and care.
Yeah.
Like you have to work really hard to get people to care.
Absolutely.
I think there's an ignorance and an arrogance associated with not working hard. So like our comms efforts, like we spend a lot of our marketing dollars internally because that's the most important thing is that our people know what's going on. They're a part of the decision-making process and that literally we know as an employer and as a company, everything that's going on as well.
So you guys expanded throughout the DC metro area. You went to Baltimore, you went to Philly. I know for you, New York was kind of a milestone for when you entered New York City. Talk to me about that process of getting into New York and then what you kind of learned after you did open up shop there.
Oh, there's a little bit of a coming home story.
Right.
You know, because there's a lot of people I had, friends and family that had never made the trek from, New York to Philly or New York to DC. So that was really cool. Doing it in arguably one of the biggest pizza markets in the world was also pretty cool. And we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. We were doing, amazing DJs. We're playing live sets on Thursdays and Fridays in the shop. Brought a lot of cool people through, and we just really put our heart and soul into making it work. And it's been extraordinary. Yeah, we went right into the heart of the city. So Nomad, which I consider to be kind of like Midtown for New Yorkers, which is right on 28th and Broadway. And it was one of the most fun and challenging experiences because I spent the first 90 days of that shop working in that shop.
Wow.
And so it was really hard for the company because, when I'm gone and I kind of make a bargain with everyone, look, like it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to be here, but I need you all to support this decision because it's important that we go and that we let people who we know are as a brand, and I'm going to go work in that pizza shop. I also need to get reconnected. There's a lot of things that we changed operationally by me spending time in that pizza shop, working shoulder to shoulder and figuring out how we can do a better job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Nomad, this is like fast casual murders row, right? I mean, it's insane, just back to back, door to door, some of the hottest fast casual brands in America. What do you learn in being in that kind of sort of pressure cooker environment that you can apply to the rest of your system?
Well, there definitely is a sink or swim mentality. Like you got to bring it every single day. And the nice thing is when you do, there's so much vertical density, but it's wild. I mean, when you're sitting there and you're literally across the street from the guys who open up their first fast casual that have the #1 restaurant in the world, and their food is remarkable.
Just being made nice from 11 Madison Park.
And by the way, amazing human beings.
Absolutely.
Amazing human beings. And you have Sweet Green who entered New York right around the corner. You have Dig In, right? And we're all friendly, but you have this like pocket of, and then Kazu Nori came in, which are the Sugarfish guys. Yeah. Which was just like, oh, okay. We're like, it was intense. But we love to be a part of it, and I think again we all had fun with each other. There was a camaraderie there, but it definitely helped establish us in the market. And we're opening up our third location there in about a couple months.
Great.
Yeah, actually less than 2 months.
Cool.
And we're going to continue to expand in New York in the next 2 to 3 years pretty aggressively.
So at some point in this story, after 2012, when you opened and you started growing, entering new markets, at some point you got capital backing from RSC Ventures and Matt Higgins. What was that process like, and why was that a good fit for you guys?
Look, I mean, it's a couple of things. I think Steve, tends to go very long, right, with companies that he invests in. He's got a longer term thesis and vision he can hold. He's not looking to get a 3 to 5x return in 3 to 5 years, as evidenced by, Equinox, SoulCycle, right? Some great iconic brands. Yes, in sort of the fitness industry, so a bit different. He invested in Momofuku and Milk Bar, which of course Milk Bar is now partners with us. We opened a really cool location in Boston together. But it was more about I needed somebody who had, who wasn't necessarily private equity or venture capital minded. I really connected with Matt Higgins, on a personal and professional level, someone that really wanted to see this big sort of meaty vision come to life. He loved the idea of the ampersand. He loved the idea that we wanted to change the world. He loved the idea that we wanted to be the case study in food service on how you can, democratize decision-making, how you can treat people very differently. And he was willing to kind of go to war, with me, with the company to help see that vision come alive. So when you have someone like Matt who ironically, I was going to say he's a shark, but he is a shark. He's in Shark Tank
He's now, yeah.
Right. When you have someone like that who wants to put all of their time, energy, and effort, he's partnered with Steve Ross. Steve Ross is wildly supportive and has a long-term investment thesis. The combination of those two guys is magic, right? And as much as they're looking to invest in magic, like I'm looking to take money from magic, and that's a pretty good partnership because special breeds special, and that's really important because to make this vision come to life, you can't be short-sighted. You need to literally be able to see 5, 10, 15 years out and understand where the work that we're doing today and how we're building and shaping the company and the vision, how that vision will be real and meaningful that far down the road. And that's been the coolest thing, is that supporting the vision at all cost and becoming extraordinary partners, it's worked out really well.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the, I guess, advantages that Matt and that RC Ventures give you guys in terms of, especially when you're expanding? I mean, is there anything that you're learning from him in that expansion process?
Oh, there's a ton. Yeah. There's a ton. I mean, we work with, the Equinox, real estate and development team, right? In terms of really helping us think through strategy, whether it's, new market strategy, existing market strategy, doing they have such a well put together sort of analytics team in terms of being able to evaluate the viability on a location by location basis. So that's been a big help. Dealing with real estate developers just on the negotiation side, right? Steve has a very prominent brand and he knows a lot of the multi-unit developers. And so I've had the opportunity to negotiate, I think, in some cases more favorable deals because it's, developer knows developer who invested at Ant Pizza and therefore one wants to help the other one out. That's been big. The moral support, unwavering moral support is key.
Yeah.
And people don't always talk about like entrepreneurship is really hard. And especially when you're doing something that's unique and very different and you have such a strong point of view that it's going to come with bumps in the road and unforced errors. And there are going to be times where you have the best economic model in the world. There are going to be times where, it's not as great. Right. And when you're sitting here and you're trying to pay people X and you're trying to invest in the development and do all of these things, it'd be very easy for somebody as your, financial partner or partner to say, well, those things, I know you believe in them, but I don't know, those are the first things to go. Let's cut them and let's get back to this contribution margin or this consolidated EBITDA. It's like, whoa. So that's where I'm saying the moral support and saying, no, we're going to stick to our values. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And when times are tough, we're going to double down on our values. And that's how we need to be thinking as partners. And I think that's how you get to the promised land.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the expansion in terms of the fact that you're at 35 shops now in nearly 7 years. In that same time frame, Blaze has grown to about 350 locations through franchising. First off, did you ever think about franchising, and why not? Did you go that route? But also, is this sort of the growth pace that you envisioned for Ant Pizza?
I would say, well, when you compare sort of 300 to 30, I feel like what
That's not a dig.
Yeah, what have I done?
When you put it that way.
Jim and I actually joke about that, but listen, there was never an option to franchise. It just, in I think a couple things, I didn't know or understand the franchising business, but secondly, I never considered it because for someone that is obsessed with brand and culture, right, and has this sort of big vision as it relates to purpose, I think those things can be a bit at odds. This idea of somebody else, running or operating underneath your brand umbrella, hiring whom they want to hire, in many cases paying what they want to pay, and in many cases, trying to really drive the greatest return on invested capital versus, what we're trying to do, which has become, a very, very, very different type of company. I think they can be at odds. And so there's that, which I think is important. The other side of it too is I'm concerned about that model as it relates to innovation, truly concerned. The amount of technological innovation, the wage disruption, there's a lot that's coming that many of us don't know about. When you think about Uber Eats, right? When you think you're in the back of, a Toyota Corolla in 2016, and none of us thought that Toyota Corolla could potentially be delivering our food.
Right.
And not just delivering it, but delivering it in a monstrous way, right? Where for many businesses, it's anywhere from 10 to 30% of your entire revenue stream. Like, who was ready for that?
Right.
How do you counteract that? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of examples of that's just one of them that who knew, right? The car that you were driving in was going to be one of the biggest disruptors in your industry. If we mass replicated our business in 2012, it would have a lot of kinks in the armor.
Yeah.
And even if we mass replicated the business we are today, like it still would have a lot of kinks in the armor. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're building out entire native digital ecosystem from end to end, rolling out different phases of it this year, including a really, really cool text-to-order platform, which is going to be innovative on its own self. But like, there's a lot of things that we're doing that if I needed a franchise partner to come along for the ride, it would be a massive capital investment. Mm-hmm. And do I want to have that tug of war? Am I ready to do that? You know, how do they feel about wage? How do they feel about me going to Capitol Hill trying to increase a wage when they have a portfolio of non-hand pizza restaurants that would devastate them, right. Or at least they think that they would. Mm-hmm. Like, so there's a lot, I think, at odds between franchising and company owned. I would say though that I think you have to pick. And it's not to knock on the franchise industry because that's not what I'm here to do. I think it can be wildly effective. It can massive growth very quickly, non-dilutive capital, not having to deal with the actual core operation side of the business is extraordinarily hard. Such high level of respect for franchise operators, one of the best operators in the world, literally. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think you got to pick. And for you be one side or the other, because I think when you split, you know, the baby, as they say, like you end up with a challenge. And so we picked, you know, our direction because it was the only direction and we're all in on that.
Sure.
And I think that makes a lot of sense for our brand.
You mentioned before the new shop in Boston that's a co-brand with Milk Bar
wild.
and Christina Tosi. So I know that, now, tell me if I'm wrong, but that came around because you had some zoning issues, right? That you guys got this location because you kind of helped each other be able to get over some of the zoning problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, I love you, Cambridge. It was tough. You know, it was tough. We were able to secure a really good location, like right smack dab in the middle of Harvard Square. And, you know, there was a small group of community members that really didn't want to see change. So we had to work through how can we be a good community partner. And part of that was this notion of, would you consider multiple storefronts? So it's not just one thing, but it's two things. Mm-hmm. And of course, right? Why not? And so I kind of went through my Rolodex and said, what would be, you know, a fun brand to partner with, someone that I'm also friends with, right? Because there's the unknown, and that I think this sort of better together thesis may actually work. And if you know Christina Tosi, she's magical, she's special, she's authentic. If you get a chance, she has an amazing Chef's Table episode. I recommend everybody watches.
Absolutely.
On Netflix. And that really is who she is.
Yeah.
And so called her up and was like, look, I have this crazy idea, but there's this location in Harvard Square looking to find a partner. Like, are you interested? And she was like, I love it. And, you know, I think the trust of each other, the friendship, and then eventually like building out a space that we both took a step back from last week and opened and said, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. So you've got amazing high contrast, black and white, massive, you know, amounts of pink all over the ceiling. It looks like And Pizza, Milk Bar, Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, something out of a Wes Anderson movie, like all mashed up into this 1,800 square foot space at Harvard Square, and it really works. Yeah. And of course, like, who doesn't love this notion of pizza and ice cream? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like every child's dream.
You said before, just a couple minutes ago, you said, you mentioned the promised land, what you're designing and how you get to that promised land. What is the promised land for you for And Pizza?
Sounds good. Honestly, I've always told people, and I stay true to this, which is if And Pizza can become the case study or the Harvard business case study that can enact the type of change in the food service industry on how you can think differently, as I mentioned before, and succeed, we are an open playbook. You literally come, I'll show you the numbers. Like, that's the most important thing to us, is enacting broader change, whether it's just through the the And Pizza brand, whether it's through the symbol itself or whether it's simply through changing policy or getting others to follow, using other people's leverage and talent, like we're totally supportive of that. Yeah. So that really is what it's about, which is like, I want to create a movement and I want others to join the movement. I don't need to be the leader of the movement, but I do want to be the case that helps other people come along for the ride, because a lot of change is coming. And I would much rather see the industry dollars not go towards lobbying groups like the American pizza community, but actually going, which big pizza is a real thing.
Yeah.
Wage suppression, keeping nutritional information off of, menus, like crazy stuff where it's like, it's 2019, really? Like that's the conversation we're going to have, but like actually go towards putting some dollars into figuring out, can we make it work? Right? Can we be on the right side of this movement? I just hate to see when dollars are being wasted on prohibiting change that we all know eventually is going to be real. Like, let's put those dollars to use. Give me a call. Let me help you or talk to you about what's working for us. Maybe there is a way where you can get behind making this work for your business so you don't feel like it's going to result in a lack of growth, right? Or fewer jobs, because that would be devastating. In no way, shape, or form do I support that in any capacity whatsoever.
Sure. So, Michael, before I let you go, put yourself in your shoes back in 2011 when you first set off on this journey for And Pizza. Thinking back then and on what you didn't know and what you know today, what would you tell yourself back then? And just think about it, too, through the lens of an operator or an entrepreneur today wants to get into the fast casual world. What would you tell them? What would your advice be to them?
I think it goes back to something earlier that I said, which was, you got to follow your gut. You got to lead with your personality. You have to be willing to be fearlessly weird, and you have to give this world something that doesn't exist. And I think if those things aren't happening, I think it's going to be really, really, really hard. And oh, by the way, it would also be helpful if there was sort of a greater purpose in mind, because the financial aspect, you can say this of any startup, but it's going to cost you twice as much and take at least twice as long, right? And so there has to be a motivating factor as to why you're doing this, whether that is, the fear, and this is my favorite thing. And I gave this interesting speech on risk, which was this notion that if there's not something inside you where there's a greater fear that you don't put your vision out into this world, that's when you know you're ready to do it. But if the fear of failure is greater than the fear of not even trying or failing at all, I would say the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
That's great. Well, Michael Lastoria, CEO and co-founder of And Pizza, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to everybody listening. I love you guys and gals, and look forward to chatting at the next industry event or meetup or wherever QSR Magazine takes us.
That's right. Thanks, Michael.
Love you guys.
There you have it. That is my conversation with And Pizza co-founder and CEO Michael Lastoria. Just lots of great ideas that he has for the future of this industry, and I think lots of things that folks can take and apply to their own businesses as well. That's it for this episode of Fast Forward. As always, please head to qsrmagazine.com for more news and insights from around the quick service and fast casual restaurant industries. Go subscribe to this podcast wherever you do listen to podcasts. We're excited to share more conversations with fast casual leaders, and we'd love to hear your feedback as well. Leave a review on your podcast app, or just shoot me an email, sam@qsrmagazine.com, whether it's feedback or whether you want to share some fast casual leaders who you think would be great for this show. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.